This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with Robin Horsley, who is the campaigner who has recently issued a video called Battle for Guildford, relating to the town centre developments, most particularly North Street, but he also mentions the Debenhams redevelopment and the implications for the forthcoming Borough Council elections. Robin, hello, thank you for joining the Guildford Dragon News.
Pleasure, Martin.
And right, so you say in your video that there was no or insufficient consultation on the proposals for the town centre, and that very few, and I'm quoting you now, very few people knew anything about it. Yeah. But it was covered extensively in the Dragon here, also in the Surrey Ad, Surrey Live, BBC Surrey, numerous council meetings, developer exhibitions, public consultations. Only those not paying attention who don't care about Guildford could have missed it, couldn't they?
Well, you might think it from that point of view, and I wouldn't, as you know, I'm a big supporter of what you do, so I wouldn't denigrate what you or other media outlets try to do, particularly what the Dragon tries to do. But the simple reality is, I'm afraid that not a lot of people did know about it, because the council depended on just putting out a press release, and they only emailed 938 people out of 150,000 residents of the borough to even notify them about it, let alone to go into the depth of what the scheme was about. The developers, of course, legally have to run a series of meetings, but obviously that's a sales pitch to a large extent. They're trying to sell their development because they're trying to garner support. And what we discovered way back in December, if you remember, was that there was actually incredibly tiny amounts of support. And what support there was just sort of copy and paste stuff from the developer's website. So you had reams and reams and reams of support statements, which were absolutely identical textually. So it wasn't the same as somebody sitting down and consciously making their objections in their own words. Okay,
but it's not actually true to say very few people knew anything about it, is it?
Well, it depends. If you think 1% is very many, then
look. Well, no. That's 1% is the number of people that the council contacted. That's not the same as the people knew about it.
Well, it depends. There's a difference between, awareness and engagement, isn't there? Yeah. Now, you may have vaguely heard something's going on. You may have walked past the site, but have you been engaged in the consultation process, such as it says on the council's website? One of their pledges, we will consult you. Their strategic framework document, that's the sentiment they express. That's what's not happened, and that's the fundamental issue that's at stake.
Okay, but I know from the stats on the site that just if you look at the Guildford Dragon alone, thousands of people were reading those articles. So I just come back to the fact that it's an exaggeration to say very few people knew anything about it, isn't it?
So, I mean, we're going way back here, but if we go back to 22nd of December, when I first found out about the scheme, and I spoke to local councillors, and the feedback I got was, oh no, this has been really widely talked about, promoted. So I said, okay, well, how on earth can somebody who's got a social media profile that reeks of being interested in politics have seen nothing about it at all? That's quite extraordinary if that's the case. So I tested it. So I went on to Nextdoor, the ultra local social media platform. So if you're somebody who really is interested in local issues, including Nextdoor is the site you're likely to go onto. And I posted on there to see what the response was. I posted a picture of the scheme and said, just a planned drawing, I think it was. And I said, are people generally aware of that? Because I wanted to test that if that was the case. It was just a freak. Because only that happened with that scheme. I previously hadn't heard anything about Debenhams either, which I found bizarre.
Okay, so you're saying that from that evidence, you think very few people knew?
People came forward in large numbers. Okay. Even on the most locally focused site, and said, I live just down the road. I've never heard about it. I don't know anything about this. So the thing is, right, we don't live in a shared information universe. If you happen to look at this stuff and your social media feeds you stuff that you're already interested in, then you'll see more of that stuff. Otherwise, there has to be a conscious effort by a council to actually communicate actively
All right.
and just dropping a press release is not going to do it.
So you're saying they weren't proactive enough in their communication on the.
Yeah, but let's put that in context, okay? It doesn't mean that if you want to change the colour of Wagamama's in Guildford that you need to have a national referendum on it. What it means is that when you're talking about a scheme which is fundamental to a town, absolutely would change completely entirely the character of the town, then the democratic principle is you should consult the people who it may affect, and that is the borough. Yeah.
Okay. Now time's against us, so I must move on now. So
yeah,
now you say you're an independent. Did you speak to any of the councillors or political parties before making this video?
Yeah, I've spoken to all of the parties at different times, going back to December, and I sent numerous emails to, I think, all of the councillors on probably at least 10 occasions, probably more, and had interactions as a result. Yeah.
But you're not aligned with any political party?
No, no.
And you're not a member of any of the political parties?
No, absolutely
okay.
not.
But in the video, I think you've criticised the stance of every party at GBC other than the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, although you haven't. I mean, what stands out to me is the examples you've given of someone speaking in alignment with your view are the two Conservatives, David Bilby and Marsha Mosley. Is that
yeah, they happen to have the same view as me, as did the chair of the planning committee, which was we need the right development. It's not a question of, obviously we don't need no development in that space. It's a fantastic opportunity right in the town centre. But no, I think what I was saying, maybe it didn't come across. The point I made about the Liberal Democrats was that despite the fact, and this is the way things should be, and they actually went along with it, because despite the fact that the impression I got from their literature in the past and conversations that I'd heard anecdotally was that their leader was essentially in support of the scheme. Unsurprisingly, she's in coalition with R4GV. But in fact, the councillors from the Liberal Democrat side viewed it on its merits. They viewed it on the facts.
The members of the planning committee you're talking about?
Yeah, members of the members of the Liberal Democratic Party on the planning committee, all 5 of them voted against the scheme, despite the fact. Now, I wasn't criticising the Lib Dems for that. In fact, what I was inferring was, that's a good thing. That's the way it should be, despite the fact that the leader, so because planning it is about that process, people who go into planning should not be predetermined. This is the way the system works. I mean, I don't know if you want to go into that, but
no, because that has been covered. But thank you for that. So now you say that people should consider their votes carefully, and I think you say that they shouldn't vote for R4GV. So who should they vote for?
Well, any alternative that they choose to vote for. I'm a non-party campaigner, right? So what that actually means, it's a bit of a confusing description, but that's what the Electoral Commission chooses to call it, okay? What it means is that I'm not advocating for any particular party here, but that doesn't mean that I can't point out to people, well, these people did do what they said they'd do, these people didn't, or what they should do in a planning meeting, for example, as we just talked about. And these people have made a statement, have said that they're against high-rise developments, and what do you want, people? Do you want, the Guildford High Street style Guildford, or do you want high-rise developments? And then done the opposite. So it's perfectly legitimate to point out and criticise in that way, but it's not legitimate for me to advocate for a particular party, because then I would not be a non-party campaigner, I will be a party.
I understand. So should they vote Labour, because the Labour councillors supported this proposal?
The Labour Party had one, I think I'm right in saying this.
One member on the planning committee.
One member on the planning committee, and I'm not sure how many members they've got. Is it 2?
2.
Yeah. So,
and I think they both support the proposal.
They both support?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Okay, I don't know about that. I only know about because of the vote on the planning committee. If people want to support the Labour Party, support the Labour Party. I mean, it's not.
But that would
That's
be to the same policy that you're criticising R4GV for.
well, if you say so, isn't one of those people retiring?
Yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't be those people then.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay. And what about, and GGG, of course, are an electoral pact with R4GV. So presumably you wouldn't recommend voting for them.
Well, electoral pact would mean that if they formed a majority together, they would presumably form part of the executive and they would have the same agenda. And this is such a pivotal issue for Guildford.
Yeah,
Then,
I don't think their pact goes that far as to say how
and I think that's a detail for people to determine. On, I mean, when Nation Council only opened this morning, like 2 hours ago, so we don't know who's going to stand yet, and we won't do for, I think, was it about a week and a half?
No, we got a pretty good idea. Okay.
2 weeks time, roughly. Yeah.
Right. So now going to the background of this whole planning situation in Guildford, what connection do you see between the development plans in Guildford town centre and the conservative planning policies that they've delivered over the last decade at national level?
That they've delivered the last decade.
Yeah, the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework.
Well, I'm not. I'm not an expert on that area. You'd need to speak to somebody else to.
Okay,
to
but
really
what I'm trying to get at is they have pressurized the demand for new housing, understandably, because of the population increase. But that isn't that at the root of the problem. And in fact, it's, it is a conservative policy, which you might agree with and might think that's the right thing to do. But isn't that the root of the problem?
Housing, the requirement to build houses is driven at a national level. Yeah. And
sorry, you broke up a little bit there, Robin. Could you just repeat?
Sorry, frog in my throat.
No. You broke up technically.
Oh, okay. Sorry. The requirement for housing is determined at a national level, and then effectively handed down to councils, isn't it? So they have quotas of housing to build, and the choice about how to do it is down to councils.
Yeah, exactly.
I know there's some controversy about the numbers that were handed down in the past, because I don't know all the detail, but students were counted,
right?
Being to an extent as being sort of per resident, therefore require housing as opposed to being transient, as most of them are. I mean, some students will stick around in Surrey after they've been to university at Surrey University, but many won't.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at here,
yeah,
you said it yourself. The numbers are handed down, and the councils have to deal with it. So it's not any local party's fault that they're trying to manage the situation as dictated by national government.
Oh no, I mean, I'm not criticising R4G4 for trying to achieve the planning requirements that are needed. That's not the issue. The issue is about the nature of the scheme in that location, because it would transform the town centre. No, I mean, look, I'm afraid I can't really give you a full appraisal. I mean, what I do know is obviously that there is a bill going through at the moment. It's in a consultation phase, as I understand it at the moment, coming down, which will affect planning in the future, and that provides uncertainty, I think, for a lot of people in local government. And until that's resolved, until that kind of washes through, we won't really know for certain what situation we're facing in Guildford or anywhere else in the country. So I think
So now in the video, you've included some personal comments about Joss Bigmore's and John Riggs' background, highlighting their career background. Don't you see how that could be inferred? Because one of them worked for Savills and one of them's a city from the city. Do you see how that could be inferred? Why did you do that?
Because I think it's a serious question. Many years ago, when I first encountered local politics in a sort of active sense, I was in a conversation with some councillors, and one of them had just got elected literally that day, and he had a background in property, and he was having a conversation with an experienced councillor, and he said, "Oh, I hope I can get on to the, deal with planning and development, or I don't know if it was regeneration. It was called there at the time. It's a different council." And the experienced councillor said, well, probably not is the answer. And I sort of piped up and said, well, why not? Surely you want to use the expertise that you've got. It seemed insane to me. If you've got experience in property development, for example, and I'm not suggesting any of those people have specifically property development as such. I mean, Savills is not really a property developer, as I understand it. But if you've got experience in that area, then the first issue is that you effectively, if you're becoming a councillor and charges that sort of thing, you turn from being sort of poacher to gamekeeper, to use a kind of vernacular. I'm not saying using the word poacher in a sort of negative sense, but just your role fundamentally and completely changes. And there was a really interesting letter on your website 2 or 3 months ago from somebody pointing this out. It's really about mindset. Your mindset is, if your mindset, I mean, my father's an architect. His mindset for 40 odd years was doing what the client wanted, and the client was the developer, right? So if you become a councillor, you have to totally change that mindset, because the people you're there to represent are your electorate, not a developer. But you have to fundamentally change your entire approach to things. And that, I think, and this is what this guy was explaining to me. Okay, I understand. You can refer to those people for advice, but it's probably not a good idea if those people generally take control of those things, unless they really have made that. And I'm not saying that any individual hasn't made that change, but it's a legitimate area of question.
Yeah, okay. But the counter argument is these people do have that expertise. I mean, if you had someone that was a former soldier in national politics, you wouldn't preclude them from being in the Ministry of Defence, would you?
No. That's not the suggestion here.
So what is the suggestion?
The suggestion is it holds up questions about how independently they can scrutinise and run relationships. So I did a freedom.
Well, that figures for John Rigg, because he's in Savills, although I'm sure he wouldn't agree that has coloured his opinion. But
I'm not.
How does it figure for Joss Bigmore, who was from the city?
How does what figure?
What is the inference people are meant to take from your comment that he worked in the city?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair and it's legitimate to look at the background to an extent, what somebody's done for a living in the past, just in the same way that you're questioning me because of my political background. I think it's perfectly legitimate you do that. And I think for a financier, I mean, let's just abstract this and talk about this generally. But one of the key things that people want to know politically is, what are people's motivations? What are they doing this for? And to come from a job where you're earning very substantial amounts of money, probably working in the city, to getting 140 quid a week is the basic remuneration for a councillor. Well,
clearly Joss Bigmore's not doing it for money. But
no, I'm not saying he's doing it for money.
Clearly he's not. Clearly he's not. So what are you saying is the relevance of his previous career?
Because of the experience he's got. What's his motivation here? One of the problems that occurs across the country is that planning for borough councils needs to be out in the sunlight so people can see what's going on, and that's the problem with consultation. If you don't have real consultation, people don't feel that's what's going on. They don't know what the motivations are. So I think it's fair to say it provides an opportunity. It provides an opportunity for those guys to come back and say, look, this is my position. These are my motivations, and the best of luck to them in that.
But Robin, there's no.
I'm not casting aspersions.
No, well.
No, I'm not.
You say you're
not. The same way you're not. You're asking me legitimate questions.
I don't understand what is the motivation for doing that, if it's not to raise some kind of questions. And
it's to raise legitimate questions. Yeah.
Okay, but then we don't. There's loads of people with different backgrounds. Why should that cause a suspicion? Why should anyone's background cause a suspicion that, I mean, and it's not as if they've got criminal convictions or anything like that. They just one is the property, one was in Savills and one was in the city.
No, of course not. I've seen a long succession of people who've come from business into politics.
Okay.
And generally they don't last very long because, you know, and I think I was probably one of these people 20 years ago who thought, okay, I've had some success commercially. Maybe I can apply some of what I learned in that sphere, in the political sphere, because politics is something I've always been avidly interested in. And then I suppose, you know, the first year or two, I realized what most people do, which is it's not a business. And you can see that in the interview you did with the leader of residents for Guildford and Villagers. He was talking about the councillors' business units. Well, they're not business units. You know, I know that's just a phrase, right? But in terms of mindset, there's no profit motive, or certainly shouldn't be. And I'm not suggesting there is, but there should be that mindset way of thinking about things.
Okay.
It's an efficiency. You're providing public service. That's the ethic that's in this. If it, you know, just to make this absolutely clear, I'm not suggesting anybody's doing anything illegal.
Right.
But we don't. That's not the framework that we have in this country. We have an ethical framework.
Okay, so you think it's their approach to how the, you know, council business not in this with the small b that is that's questionable here.
I think it's legitimate to question the approach. Yeah.
Okay, now what but isn't it, looking at your background, you have worked in campaign organisation for different political parties, I understand, in the past.
No, I've not worked for political parties. I've never ever been paid a penny by any political party for anything I've ever done. No, I've worked for, and the way, so let me just explain that. My sort of political awakening was with Liberal Democrats, because my aunt was, and I think still is, a Liberal Democrat councillor. And when I first got involved in politics, I joined the Conservative Party because that was the only thing going on in Surrey Heath at the time, really. I mean, it was you know, one of the safest Conservative seats in the country, and got involved for a while. But I very soon realised that I was not a party person, and I take a pretty dim view of the whipping system in Westminster, for example. You know.
Okay, but have you helped with campaigns for the Conservatives in Surrey Heath?
Yeah, for Conservative candidates, but only on the basis of candidates I've known. And I got all kinds of trouble and walked away from the Conservative Party on numerous occasions because they wanted to use me as a Conservative Party resource. And I would say, look, I'm not a Conservative Party resource. If I know an individual councillor or a group of councillors and I know them all, then yes, I'll help them with their campaigns. If I believe, from everything I've learned, you know, I'll put some power to the elbow. I'll push their bus uphill, help them push their bus uphill, if I believe that they are. But the same goes on. I've worked with people in the Labour Party. I've worked with people, and as I was saying a minute ago, I'm not sure with the Liberal Democrats who I've worked directly with a Liberal Democrat councillor in any context, but certainly, you know, I work on predominantly. I work on issues, which is predominantly what I'm actually working on here. It's the issue of the town centre.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at that issue then. So, if it was your decision, what kind of development would you like to see in the town centre?
Okay, it's not my decision, and I do not wish it to be.
Okay.
Well,
so you haven't got a particular development in mind that you'd rather see there. It's just that you don't like the existing plans.
No, that may sound evasive. It's not. But the very point of this is that when a council is doing something like this that is so fundamental, they really should consult all the stakeholders. And in this instance, all the stakeholders are all the people of the borough, arguably beyond the borough as well, because in order to be commercially successful, Guildford has to draw people from beyond the borough as well. So they really are actually our stakeholders as well. And then in terms of the scheme that you come up with, needs to be a reflection and understanding of that, because democratic politics is not about winner takes all. It is about working out the best accommodation for everybody, the most equitable solution for something. And perhaps the reason that various schemes over the years have failed is because it hasn't happened many, many times in the past. I mean, I think it was at the 9th or the 10th scheme that have been looked at over 30 years was the suggestion. I mean, I don't know. That's true.
Okay, well, I think that's about right.
Yeah.
So finally, you don't like the way things are at GBC. So are you going to stand?
No, no, I'm not. I mean, I've learned that it's the wrong time of life for me.
Right.
The amount of time commitment that I would inevitably be putting into it is not practical, and therefore I don't think I do a very good job. And I think, and I've seen this in the past, where people have tried to invent time liberty and become councillors, and then had to stand down pretty shortly afterwards, which just causes chaos, really. And I just don't think it would be fair to do that. Nor equally, this is, to me, if you want to understand me politically, my political position, you chop me in half and it says Democrat down the middle like a stick of rock. I don't mean Democrat in terms of the American sense, but it's about the system of making sure that works.
Okay, you mean Democrat with a small d, nothing to do with the Liberal Democrats?
No, exactly. Yeah, nothing to do with the Democrat, nothing to do with the Democratic Party in the US. Yeah. No.
Okay, and how long should we expect your campaign to continue?
Until polling day.
Until polling day. Okay.
Yeah.
Robin Horsley, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Cheers.